Hey guys, I hope you're having a great day and I hope you're ready for what we're going to read today. It's a malicious compliance episode today. These stories are going to be so fun. Not only fun, but they're going to be so satisfying to read, and I hope you're excited. Before we get into the episode, if you could like the video and subscribe if you want to, that would be amazing. And let's get into story number 1. Don't like the way I park? Fine, I'll follow the rules exactly. A couple of months ago, I had a run-in with the self-appointed HOA enforcer of my neighborhood. Let's call her Linda. For context, I don't live in an HOA community, but Linda likes to pretend that we do. She's the kind of person who leaves passive-aggressive notes on cars and knocks on doors to complain about lawn heights, calls the city for violations that don't actually exist. The issue started because I parked my car on the street in front of my house. It's perfectly legal, and I've been doing it for years without any complaints, but apparently Linda decided that my car was an eyesore. One day I found a note tucked under my windshield wiper that said, "This is not a parking lot. Park in your driveway like a respectful neighbor. Don't make me involve the city." It annoyed me, but I shrugged it off and I kept on parking where I always do. That wasn't good enough for Linda. The next time she confronted me in person. "Linda, I've told you before, parking on the street is inconsiderate. You have a driveway. Use it." "Me, it's legal to park here and I'm not blocking anything." "Linda, it doesn't matter. It's ugly and it makes the neighborhood look bad. Park in your driveway or I'll report you." That's when I decided, fine, if she wants me to park in my driveway, I'll park in my driveway, but I'll follow every single rule to the letter. You see, my driveway's small. If I park my car in it, it blocks the sidewalk. Technically, it's against city ordinances to obstruct the sidewalk, so the next day I pulled my car right into my driveway, perfectly centered, and guess what? It completely blocked the sidewalk. It didn't take long for Linda to notice. She marched up to my door, red-faced and furious. "Linda, you can't block the sidewalk, that's illegal." "Me, oh, I thought you wanted me to park in my driveway." "Linda, not like that, park properly." "Me, there's no other way to park in my driveway without blocking the sidewalk." "I guess I'll have to park back on the street then." Her face was priceless. She sputtered for a moment before stumping off. Thinking that was the end of it, I parked back on the street. But no, Linda wasn't done yet. She actually called the city on me. A week later, a city inspector came by. He checked out the situation, saw that my car was legally parked on the street, and then told me I was doing nothing wrong. However, he did mention that Linda had made several complaints about code violations in the neighborhood, and they were getting tired of her nonsense. After that, I didn't hear from Linda for a while, until last week when she started parking her car on the street in front of my house. So I did what any good neighbor would do. I called the city and I reported it. Turns out her car was slightly too close to a fire hydrant. She got a ticket. I've really missed this subreddit. That's so fun to read. Yeah, the top comment, laughing my ass off. That ending is beautiful. Yeah, I'm sorry that it's been so long since I've made a malicious compliance episode. I'm remembering how fun these are. This comment says, "Find a cheap, knackered old wreck of a car and then park it on her driveway while she's out. Then stand back and watch her head implode." Yeah, Linda sounds so annoying. Okay, moving on to post number 2. I don't need to tell you what subreddit it's on because the entire episode is on this subreddit. Post number 2 is called "That Time Karen Tried to Bully Another Mum and Got an Eyeful." Edited to insert paragraph breaks properly. Thank you. I really appreciate that, OP. I, 33 female, unexpectedly gave birth 2 months earlier than my due date. Thankfully, baby and I are doing great and we've now made it home. As you can imagine, coming that early meant that baby needed a rather long stay in the infant spa. NICU. Now that we're home and I've been able to process everything, I wanted to share a moment of malicious compliance that helped me bring some sort of levity to a really scary experience. One of the most important things for a baby, especially premature babies, is skin-to-skin time, which is where mothers or fathers will be either topless or open their shirts to cuddle their infant. Baby struggled with jaundice, so our skin-to-skin time was very limited at first because of light therapy. We had been moved to a new location in the NICU right next to another baby and across from 2 others. A standard of care in the NICU is monitoring the baby's breathing and heart rate and oxygen levels. These monitors look like old-school tube TVs and are approximately 16 inches by 16 inches and can display babies in other areas as well if the nurses need. So I'm new to this little care area and I'm getting ready to set up the hospital provided screen so that I can get my skin-to-skin time. But I realize I may end up blocking the monitor for the baby next to me from the nurse. I asked the nurse if she can still see or if my setup was blocking anything for her. Obviously, I don't want to interfere with the care of another patient. She tells me everything was good, so I settle in for some much-needed snuggles. Not even 10 minutes later, I feel somebody in my space, and I look up to see a woman glaring down at me. Once I've made eye contact, Karen starts in on me, while topless and holding a baby, so very vulnerable, about how I'm blocking the nurse from caring for her baby. When I try to explain that I asked before setting things up, she refuses to listen and continues to lecture and gets more aggressive and angry about how I'm causing her baby not to receive appropriate care and I'm pushing her out of the care area. After all the emotional distress and frustration of being in the hospital, I finally snapped. I looked at the nurse and I told her to take away the screen. The nurse was horrified and started saying, "But your privacy," to which I replied firmly, It would seem that my privacy and modesty don't really matter as much as Karen's comfort. Get rid of the screen. This pissed off Karen even more as she realized that she'd have to spend the next hour staring at my topless self. She got very annoyed and uncomfortable, especially when the doctors were managing rounds, and both got flustered and tried to insist that I get a new screen. I may have been the a-hole, but I was simply done. I stared right back and I said, according to my neighbor here, my privacy doesn't matter, so we all get to be uncomfortable. When I tell you if looks could kill, I'd be dead, I'm not joking. The doctors didn't want to deal with it, and the nurses who had to deal with it were laughing quite a bit. They then brought the screen back out and tried to show Karen that they can totally see all of her baby stats on any monitor, so there was no reason for this outburst. I wish I could say this was the last time that she freaked out about this, but she pulled this same kind of stunt almost every time I tried to snuggle my baby, until her baby was finally discharged a week later. But seeing the look of shock on her face when I just forced everybody to look at my boobs is probably going to make me giggle every time I think about it. I love the bit at the end that says they then brought the screen back out and tried to show Karen that they can totally see all of her baby stats on any monitor, so there was no reason for this outburst. Yeah, like this comment says, good, she deserved it for sure. Maybe she was also stressed with the baby in the NICU too, but that does not excuse her attitude. I remember how my body shyness lessened after giving birth, with all the medical personnel who surround a delivering mother, and also feeling crappy after an emergency C-section. Everybody there's probably seen plenty of boobs, they were fine. And the comment below that one says maybe she was also stressed with the baby in the NICU too, but that doesn't excuse her attitude. Yeah, totally, it's an explanation, not an excuse. Okay, moving on to story number 3. Either be fired or accept a massive pay cut. Okay, I'll take the firing. I worked for a company for 14 years. I loved working there for 12 of those years. There were 2 main parts to the job. The first part was the sales side of things. This was away from the office in the customer's location. This involved quite a bit of driving, and on a couple of occasions flying abroad to work face to face with the customers to deliver a high quality product. We weren't the cheapest, but we were the superior product, and I was the best employee when it came to delivering the product. I consistently got rave reviews from customers for my personal style when it came to delivering the product and executing the customer's vision. I got a huge amount of repeat business, and I got a lot of new business through word of mouth, with customers recommending the company based on their experiences with me. The second part was the office side. This was my weaker side. I hated cold calling potential customers with numbers that I found in the phone book. When it came to answering the phone and speaking to potential customers who initiated contact with us, I was completely fine. But I wasn't great at making the calls. That was my only real not great part of my job. So in the office, I wasn't asked to make any calls. Instead, I prepared the product, designed new product, trained new staff members. That ended up being one of the biggest parts of my job. I was also the problem solver, helping out whenever and wherever, filling in for sick employees whenever I could. I liked the owner and I liked the manager. I liked all the staff around me. All in all, it was a great job that I was really good at and I took pride in. The company had been doing so well that the owner slowly expanded over the 12 years since I started working for the company. I joined about 3 months after he started, so I'd been a part of this expansion. I worked out of my nearest office, but I often traveled to other areas to train their staff. I got loaned out, as it were, to other companies to help train their staff. At one point, I was a guest lecturer at a university, teaching medical students how to deliver complicated explanations to people who don't have the base knowledge that you yourself do. After 12 years, I was on a decent salary. Not massive, but I was happy. And then the owner decided to sell off part of the company. He was selling the area where my local office was. He told me that he'd love for me to remain as his employee, but I'd need to work from a different place. This would either require me to move or to quadruple at minimum my daily commute. The other option was to remain working from my current office but with a new boss. I chose the second option. Before the new owner bought the company, she worked alongside the staff for a couple of weeks to see how we operated. This was before any of us knew that she was about to buy the company. As far as we knew, she was another employee and she was shadowing us to learn. She came with me on assignments in the field and saw my abilities. When the sale was announced and we were informed that she was the new owner, everybody was so surprised. She made some sweeping staffing changes. The manager left to start her own business. Since the new owner was also going to be the manager, a lot of staff were let go. The secretary, myself, and a couple of newer hires were kept on. The new hires were on the lowest wages, not salaries. Anybody who'd gotten to a decent level got let go. And since almost everybody was on a 0 hours contract, she was able to do this. While technically it was a new company for the customers, it was the same old business. The company still had the same trading name. The only real difference was that there was a new owner and the registered business name was now different. As far as the customers were concerned, nothing had changed. My job for the first few months after the sale was to train up the remaining staff to replace the more experienced staff members who'd been let go. I recommended a couple of new hires who I had experience working with in the past. I was open and honest with the owner, and I let her know that one of them was a close friend and one of them was my girlfriend. Both were more than qualified for the work and both were happy to join. My friend had recently come back to the country after a year of traveling, while my girlfriend could only work during school holidays, worked in a school. The owner gave them both interviews and then hired them since we needed the staff. Over the next 2 years, business started to fall. The reason was simple. The new owner decided to try and maximize profits by increasing prices while also decreasing the quality of the product. For new customers, that wasn't noticeable. They just thought we were expensive and the product wasn't the best. But for old customers who'd been with us for over 10 years, they immediately noticed. They were being charged more and they were receiving a less or worse quality. So the owner doubled down and increased the prices again. 95% of our old customers left. New customers almost never became repeat customers. Complaints skyrocketed. And while all of this was going on, our staff turnover rate was ridiculous. People left after a few months when they realized the minimum wage they were being paid was not worth it. Under the old owner, the average hourly pay for new employees was around 2.5 times the minimum wage. This made people care about their jobs and want to keep them. My girlfriend quit. My friend remained but was looking for something new. Then I got a phone call. The owner needed me to come to the office. This was unexpected. I just finished working on location with a customer. My next customer was in 2.5 hours and it was a half an hour drive away. The office was about an hour and 10 minutes away from both places. If I drove back to the office, I'd have about 5 minutes in the office before leaving. My mileage was paid above my regular salary, so I was saving the company money by doing this. Also, parking was a nightmare at the second location, so I intended to get there as early as I could to find parking and then read a book. The manager didn't care. She needed me to return to the office, so I did. I arrived back to be handed a letter by the owner. It was informing me of a disciplinary meeting to take place in a couple of days. I could bring a witness along if I so desired. This knocked me for 6. I was the best employee. I read her list of complaints about my performance and I started working on my defense. At the meeting, I was declined to have a witness. Instead, I decided to record the audio for the entire meeting on my phone without informing her. Where I live, it is legal and I didn't need consent. The boss's witness was her friend that she'd met at yoga and hired for an office role, firing the secretary who'd been there long before the takeover. Every point that she raised, I could counter. They were ranging from the week, you were unavailable to work for a week in August, I booked a week's holiday so I could attend my cousin's wedding on the other side of the country and turn it into a holiday, to the very pathetic, you were late for work on the 12th of May. Is that the day my car broke down and I called the office to let you know? I don't know. I do. Here's the receipt from the garage dated May the 12th. To the downright lies. This one I can't write as a quote. Basically, she accused me of gross misconduct for breaking health and safety laws in the way that I was delivering a product for a customer. I had not broken health and safety laws. I knew what I was doing since, as I've mentioned already, I'd been doing this for 14 years at this point. She'd witnessed me do this on multiple occasions and had never mentioned it before because it wasn't an issue. She even had me train staff in this specific delivery method because it wasn't an issue. She finished her list by telling me that she doesn't want to lose me, but she can't justify keeping such a poor employee at my current salary. I had 2 choices. I could either sign a 0 hours contract and work for minimum wage, or she could fire me with 2 weeks notice. I countered that she'd have to give me 12 weeks notice, since my contract guaranteed me 1 week's notice for every year of employment, up to a maximum of 12. She argued that I'd only been her employee for 2 years, since before then I worked for the previous owner. I informed her that with how the business takeover had run, it counts as continuous employment. I quoted the exact law and code that backed me up. She asked me for a 30-minute break in the meeting to let me think about her offer. She went to call her lawyer. When she came back, she informed me that since she was firing me for gross misconduct, she didn't have to give me any notice at all. If I wanted to remain and move to the 0 hours contract, I could do that today. But if I didn't, then she'd have to fire me. But because she was so nice, she would give me the 2 weeks notice. I asked her for a couple of hours to go home and think about it, and she allowed it. I knew the reason that she wanted me to remain for at least the 2 weeks was because one of our few remaining bigger customers was set to have a product delivery from me in that time. They would only work with me. The owner had tried sending other staff in my place on several occasions, and every single time there'd been problems. It wasn't the fault of the staff. It was just a very difficult delivery for a very specific customer, which needed to be perfect. And as a result, this customer would only deal with me. I called the office and I spoke to the owner. I declined the offer of 0 contract hours and I said that I'd be leaving. She then said that she was giving me my 2 weeks notice. I declined her offer of 2 weeks notice. I informed her that I was being fired for gross misconduct. Then surely I can't be relied upon to safely deliver the product. Therefore, it'd be best for everybody involved if I didn't return to work. She panicked and said that she needed me for those 2 weeks. I feigned ignorance and let her know that I was just thinking about what's best for the company. After all, you can't have unsafe staff delivering the product to your customers. However, if she wanted to rethink the gross misconduct accusation, then I would work my 12 weeks notice. They were her options, 0 weeks or 12, and she chose 12. For those 12 weeks, I worked the same way that I had for 14 years. I didn't coast, I didn't slack, I didn't badmouth the company on my way out. I continued to deliver the product in my own personal, exceptional way. I also got in touch with a lawyer who was a specialist in employment law. For those 12 weeks, the owner barely spoke to me. She resented the fact that I knew my legal rights and didn't just believe her lies. guys. She hated the fact that I could defend myself. She was so petty. She accidentally dropped my mug in the kitchen, breaking it. Most petty of all, she paid for every member of staff in the office to have a spa day, except for me. I was asked to work my day off and answer the phones while everybody else was being pampered. Nobody knew that I hadn't been invited until they arrived at the spa and I wasn't there. Here's the thing, I'm a big fat bearded guy. I have no interest in a spa day. If she'd offered it to me, I would have thanked her and declined the kind offer. But by pointedly excluding me, she was making herself look terrible. For the last 2 weeks, I was training up my friend to basically take over for me. At the end of the 12 weeks, my final day came. The owner had nothing planned, not so much as a card after 14 years, 2 for her. The office assistant manager who'd become a friend had got me some presents, but had to give them to me once the boss was gone for fear of reprisals. The day after my final day, 2 things happened. The first was my friend who I'd been training up to replace me quit. He was on a 0 hours contract, so required no notice. He was so unhappy with her treatment of me and was unhappy that she expected him to do my previously salaried job for minimum wage. He hadn't informed me of his plans to leave, and I only learned about it when he knocked on my door in the middle of the day when he should have been at work, just to let me know. The second was the owner received a letter informing her that I was bringing legal proceedings against her for unfair dismissal. I'd arranged it with my lawyer to be delivered the day after my final day. According to the office assistant, she went pale and started crying before leaving the office to call her lawyer. She refuted my claims for unfair dismissal, said it was gross misconduct, tried to come up with some more reasons for firing me, but the truth was the company was making less money because of her business practices, and I was the highest and only salary. I had evidence that I was a great employee. I had evidence that she'd asked me to move to a 0 hours contract. She initially tried to deny this since the gross misconduct fabrication makes no sense if she wanted me to stay, but once my lawyer provided her with a transcript of the entire meeting, along with a copy of the recording, she knew that she was done. Still though, she let the case drag on for over a year. I think she hoped the legal fees would lead to me dropping the case. Little did she know my lawyer was working on a no-win, no-fee basis, while hers wasn't. She ended up settling out of court. The aftermath? The office assistant who'd become a friend quit a couple of months after I left. She hated how I was treated and didn't feel safe working for such an untrustworthy boss. Several former customers contacted me personally to inquire why I was no longer with the company. Apparently the owner was telling them that I just quit. Yeah, this owner's not very smart, are they? I informed them that I'd been fired for cost-cutting reasons. They moved their business elsewhere. Several offered me jobs. One went so far as to offer me a part-time job and to pay me to attend college to earn a degree, required for them to hire me full-time. That was a lovely offer, but they were one of the customers who were a bit too far away to commute, and I wasn't really ready to move. In the end, I found a new job in a different industry where a lot of my skills transferred over, currently earning more than I was working less hours and for better owners, and the business is floundering. COVID left the new owner desperate for cash. She cancelled orders but refused to refund customers money, citing an act of God clause in the contract. The business's Facebook and Google reviews have tanked. Most of the staff have left. The business is afloat, but barely. Oh my god, why were they ever the owner? They had no idea what they were doing. That's actually unbelievable. By the sounds of it, they did just about everything wrong that they could. And also like common sense stuff as well, like making everything way too expensive, while also making the quality worse. The top comment says a hardworking employer that has a good work ethic is worth their weight in gold. Happy employee equals better work. I'm not sure why a lot of upper management don't seem to understand this. Good for you though, seems like people got what they deserved. The second top comment says that felt like a slow burn revenge, and I love it. And the comment below that one too. I agree with other comments, very satisfying and detailed. I'm not sure why private sector people think they own their employees and that they can mess about with them at will like a cat toying with a mouse. The comment below that one says I'm gonna take over a business that's already running well, and then I'm gonna tweak it to death so it becomes unviable. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. Yeah, right, because you know so much more than they do. It's too bad that you had to go through with this, but you handled it so well. I'm so happy that you're in a good space now. Yeah, like, oh, I'm gonna change everything about a business that's already doing well to the point where it's a failing business. Oh yeah, such a good idea. Okay, moving on to story number 4. HOA wants me to join, so I do. Just not how they expected. This one's a story about a property that I own but I rent out. It may sound strange, but I don't think I could afford to live there these days. It's become somewhat exclusive. I guess this one could also go in pro-revenge. I've used dollars here because it's what most people reading this are going to relate to. This does not take place in the US, and I've given an approximate dollar value for local currency. It's in South Africa, and it's going to be very long. About 1 million years ago, my property was part of a large farm. I bought it about 30 years ago, long after the farm was broken up, but before there was any development near it. The piece of land that I got was near the back entrance that joined into a dirt road that ran past. The more expensive plots were near the tarred road in the front. Originally, I bought a large chunk of the land intending to do some farming, but that never happened. About 20 years ago, some of the owners got organized. We'll call them the organized owners. as 00 and had the area designated as a municipal suburb, the municipality agreed to put in tarred roads and water and electricity if a certain percentage of the properties were developed. A construction company linked to the 00 went around contacting the owners who had land but no buildings, offering to build houses for us at a really reasonable price, contingent on them getting a certain minimum amount of people signing up. While that was happening, one of the organised owners approached me and offered to buy half of my property. I agreed, and the money I got for the sale, which was about 4 times what I'd paid for the entire chunk of land 10 years prior, combined with a small loan from the bank, gave me what I needed to pay for a house to be built, and it was a fairly large and nice house too. I stayed in the house for a few years and my mum moved in with me. I had decided to subdivide the property again and build her a house next to mine, but unfortunately an undiagnosed tumour took her before the house could even be started. Well, it was diagnosed, but too late to do anything. Oh, I'm so sorry, OP. Soon after she died, we moved out of the house and started renting it out. About a few weeks before we moved out, the organised owner that I'd sold the land to started talking about starting an HOA. I was not interested, and I left soon after. About 2 years later, the neighbour organised owner contacted me. There were 2 roads entering the area these days. The original tarred road that was near where the farmhouse had been, and was entered from a fairly busy main road, and my dirt road back entrance, which was now a tarred entrance from a wide but not very busy municipal road. The HOA was trying to get the old farm road blocked off to improve security and decrease through traffic, and wanted the road next to my property to be the main and only entrance to the HOA community. And they were pressuring me to join. I said no, and I was adamant, and eventually they accepted it. But they told me they wanted to have a sign near the road welcoming people to the neighbourhood, and the only practical place to put it was on the edge of my property. They also wanted to build a little guard hut and have a security guard permanently monitor who went in and who came out, and they wanted to build his shed on my property. We came to an agreement whereby they'd mow the lawn and pay the equivalent of about $35 a month for the land that they needed. I was happy with this arrangement, since the property was fairly large and it didn't really cost them anything, since they already had a full-time gardening service servicing the HOA. This all happened over a decade ago. They eventually got the other main road blocked off, and the HOA is paying for rent-a-cop to be permanently stationed close to my property, as well as mowing my lawn and paying me enough money for takeaway for the family each month. I'm occasionally contacted by members of the HOA to get me to sign up, but I'm not interested. My property's been rented to the same tenant for all of these years, and everything there's going well for me. Until about 3 years ago, when somebody scared the crap out of my tenant's young daughter by making weird noises and shooting a gun close to her bedroom window 3 or 4 times over about a month. This scared my tenant, and I guess it scared the HOA, because they and my tenant contacted me with a proposal. I joined the HOA, but they exclude me from some of the HOA rules, excluding me from paying the monthly fees, and in addition they'll build a wall around the entire HOA neighbourhood, including electric fencing and security cameras. They told me that they wanted to do this for a while, but they were unwilling to build the wall on a property that was not in the HOA. I couldn't see the downside, and so I agreed. The dishonest dealings. It took a little bit over a year to build the wall and get everything complete, which is quite fast, and then a month after everything was done, my tenant got an HOA warning about his dogs barking. He told the HOA that while the property was in the HOA, it was exempt from the rules. The HOA told him that they'd cancelled the exemptions, and that he had 30 days to comply. He contacted me, and I opened some mail that I got from the HOA. I'd ignored it since I was supposed to be exempt from the rules and the fees. Man, did I get a surprise. They'd retroactively cancelled the exemptions, and were claiming, number 1, that I pay late fees going back over a year, number 2, that the easement agreed had been cancelled, and that they were also retroactively cancelling it a year back because the HOA contract allowed them to use small unused portions of HOA members' land for the common good for free, and number 3, that I refund them the money that they paid for the easement over that period, and number 4, that I owed the money for the garden service mowing the large lawn, and number 5, that I would be fined for each infraction my tenant failed to remedy. This started an expensive process involving lawyers and the court system that ended with a judge telling me that what the HOA had done was mainly legal. They had the right to revoke the exemptions, but that they had to give me 30 days notice. As I was walking to my car, the neighbour organised owner, the one who bought half my land so many years ago, told me that I was stupid to have refused to join when the HOA started, as I could have been a founder member, whatever that means, and that next time I should be sure to understand the documents I signed before signing them. The malicious compliance. Neighbour organised owner was right. I should have read the contract better. Also, I was interested in what it meant to be a founding member. Spoiler, nothing. And so when I got home, I grabbed the HOA contract that I'd signed, as well as all the other documentation they provided me with, and I started reading. I was determined to break every rule I could find a loophole to break. I didn't even get past the first page. While the street address of the property is used to identify it for all practical purposes, in the city records it's got a unique property number that has to be used on legal records. When my mum moved in, I'd subdivided the remaining property, but I hadn't yet started building on it, and when I gave the HOA the easement all of those years ago, it had been on the property that I'd sliced off for my mum, and when the HOA set up the contract, they had simply used the property number from the easement. The next afternoon, the neighbour neighbor organised owner delivered and had me sign for 2 documents, one telling me that my exemptions would expire in 30 days, and one letting me know that the easement would no longer be required after 30 days. I think he was being a bit malicious here, because I lived about an hour away from the property, and he drove it out himself. The revenge. Exactly 30 days to the hour after the HOA had given me their 30 days notice, I knocked on the neighbor organised owner's door. Did I mention he was the president of the HOA? And I had him sign for 2 documents. The first was that I planned to build a house on my HOA property, which confused him, and the second was a notice they had 30 days to remove from the property the guard shed, the parts of the electric boom on my property, as well as the sign. He tried to engage me, but I ignored him. I climbed into my car and I drove off. Early the next morning, I got a call from the HOA lawyer who explained to me that their junk would be staying on my property since it was in an unused part of my land. I explained that I was building a house there and that the land would not be unused anymore. I could hear the smirk as he told me that building a second house to be spiteful would not be accepted by the courts. I sure hope he could hear the smirk in my voice when I told him that the property in question did not have a house and was in fact barely even large enough for a house to be built and would not be large enough for any extraneous buildings. I then told him to go look up the property in question and call me back. I'd sliced off just enough to be legal, which was just enough to build a small house. It took them just under 5 days to get back to me. Their lawyer told me that the terms of the easement meant that I could not cancel without their permission, so I emailed him a photo of the document they sent to me cancelling the easement. That afternoon, neighbor organised owner invited me to lunch, his treat, to discuss the problem. I said no thanks. He extended the offer again 2 days after, and again I said no thanks. Others of the original organised owners contacted me to try to talk. Some sounded aggressive, some sounded sympathetic. I said no thanks to all of them. Eventually the lawyer phoned and asked if we could come to some sort of arrangement. I asked him what he had in mind, and he told me that he was prepared to discuss exclusions in exchange for access to my property. So I said no thanks and please don't call me again. About 9 days before their 30 days was up, I got a call from a different lawyer. He said that he wanted to negotiate a surrender. His words, not mine. I agreed to meet him at his office the next day. I'd already had documents drawn up and the meeting was as simple as me giving him the documents and him reading them over. My new easement offer, number 1, included everything offered by the old easement offer. Number 2, I changed the line mow the lawn to get the property to HOA standards and keep it there since it was now in the HOA. Number 3 would cost them about $500 a month instead of $35. This amount would increase with inflation. The previous contract didn't include that bit. Number 4, when cancelled for whatever reason, the HOA would have to pay me a cancellation fee of around $7,500. And number 5, the contract automatically terminated 30 days after if any disciplinary action was taken towards me, my tenant, or the property, if any complaints were levied by the HOA against the property, if any legal action was taken against the property by anybody in the HOA, and number 6, that lawyer who had offered to negotiate surrender would be allowed to mitigate any disputes between us at HOA's expense, and number 7, the HOA would pay all of my legal fees if any legal action was taken against me. I deliberately left some insane things in there so that I could appear to concede some points or be negotiated down when the HOA got indignant about the points I actually cared about. The lawyer did not look happy. He said that my proposal sounded unfair, but that he would have the HOA president look at them. I reminded him that in 8 days I'd be setting a group of men armed with sledgehammers that had anger management issues loose on whatever of theirs was still on my property. That evening I got an irate call from the HOA president. He told me that he was never going to sign the new contract. I said okay. He then told me that I was charging too much per month and that it should be at the same rate as the previous contract. I pointed out that when I signed the previous contract the area was under development and there was at least one other road leading in and out, but that now there's only mine. And besides, mine was now developed and had everything they needed. He told me that I was forcing them to sign a document they didn't want to sign. I told him that he was free to not sign it. He whined about everything he could even think of, and then eventually told me that I'd be hearing from his lawyer. The next morning, Surrender Lawyer called to ask if I'd be willing to come to their office to sign the contract. When I got there, I learned that Surrender Lawyer was not a lawyer, but a paralegal. He handed me the contract and asked me to sign it. He laughed when I told him that I'd have to read through it first to make sure nothing was different, and mumbled something that sounded like, "I'm sure you would." I read the contract. Nothing had been changed, not even a single thing. And the HOA president had signed it, with the surrender paralegal signing as a witness. I looked at him and said, "Why did he sign this? It was stupid to sign it." And the paralegal looked at me and said, "I started telling him that signing it would be a bad decision, but he told me that I wasn't being paid to think or give legal advice and to shut up." So I shut up. I said, "Do you understand what he signed here?" He looks at me and nods. He said, "I asked him if I should have one of the lawyers look at it before giving it to you, and he told me that we'd already billed enough for this and that he'd sign it and sue me after the easement was safe." This happened about a year and a half ago. It took 6 months for the HOA to find out how screwed they were. They wanted to sue me, but their lawyers explained to them that there was no way to win. Even if the court sided with them, all they would get is the easement contract voided, and they did not think that the court would side with them. The lawyers were adamant about one thing: the HOA could not live with the HOA pays me legal fees if legal action was taken against me, since it didn't limit the people taking legal action against me to the HOA. As worded, the HOA would be forced to pay for my legal fees if anybody took legal action against me. They argued that the courts probably would not enforce that, since the context of the agreement was to do with the HOA, and I told them that I was prepared to find out, since the HOA would definitely be the ones taking action against me if they did challenge it. I eventually signed an addendum to the contract that said that the neighbor organised owner, HOA president, would personally pay all of my legal fees unless he held no position at all in the HOA, and that the HOA would pay all legal fees if the HOA took legal action against me. He resigned from the HOA at the end of that meeting. I politely told him in front of everybody that he should not sign documents unless he understands what he's signing. He did not look pleased. It came out during the mediation. You cannot even imagine how happy the lawyers were that their paralegal was mediating, that without the ability to control access to the HOA neighborhood through the security boom, partially on my property, the HOA had become a gated community a number of years back. The HOA would be in breach of their own articles and would be dissolved. I also learnt, should have been obvious to me, that all the security cameras were wired and all terminate in the guardhouse and guard shed. So basically, it was either my way or the end of the HOA. That first mediation was really funny. My paralegal looked more than a little glum as we assembled and he called everybody to order. I suspected that he'd been told to work against me, so I took the initiative. I reminded everybody there that I had agreed to let paralegal mediate, but that I'd agreed to no arbitration at all. If I didn't feel like the proceedings were fair, I'd leave, and they could go ahead and sue. Paralegal brightened up and things actually went quite well. I'm writing this after getting home from the latest mediation. I built a paddling pool for the neighborhood dogs, as in I made it myself. I dug a hole and I packed it with stone and I added a concrete finish. It was my first attempt, and if I say so myself, it looked, well, terrible. The HOA called for a mediation meeting, which is what they do now instead of taking official action. I've declined their mediation requests in the past, in which they told me as nicely as they could that the paddling pool was an eyesore right at the entrance of the HOA. I asked them to create a list of what needed to be fixed and how it needed to be fixed to give to me at the next meeting. The list was extensive. It pretty much required the pool to be rebuilt from scratch. I asked them if there were any way to reduce costs on the work they needed to get it up to HOA standards, and they assured me that there was not. I thanked them. I pulled out a copy of the agreement where they'd agreed to get the property to HOA standards, which I'd highlighted, and I handed it to them with the list. I told them the HOA usually preferred it if these sorts of things were dealt with in 30 days. They started arguing until the mediator reminded them that they could not force me to comply without causing the easement to end. I should mention that usually their lawyers no longer attend these things. They said they'd get it done. I also learnt a lot about neighbor organised owner today. Number one, I found out that neighbor organised owner sold his property about 3 months back and is apparently leaving the country for Australia. Number two, I found out that the HOA had successfully sued him for a crap load of money that they'd lost to his mismanagement as part of his vendetta against me. And number three, I also learnt that he had a vendetta against me. I have no idea what I did to upset him. I'm not sure if I'll screw with the HOA anymore. I already think that I'm so close to breaking them. The only thing stopping them from cancelling the contract is the massive financial loss if they do. I guess a lot depends on how they treat me and tenants going forward. Also, I do like the payments every month, so I am motivated to play nice. Neighbor organised owner was right though in the end. You really shouldn't sign documents unless you understand what you're signing. That was such an adventure to read. I got so immersed into that. Yeah, like this comment says, I also learnt that he had a vendetta against me. I had no idea what I did to upset him. Okay, that was too much. I'm wheezing. Yeah, that was so fun to read, and I love how it went on for a long time. Like, this is something that went on for ages. Yeah, definitely one of my favourite ones that we've read on here. And moving on to post number 5. Sorry, ma'am, of course your son can try the 7 million SHU hot sauce. I work in a hot sauce store in a busy outlet mall. We're a well-liked locally owned business and have many loyal return customers, but at this particular location, we also get a lot of tourists who are curious about our challenge items or Hot Ones product. We've got a large variety of samples available every day. Literally like 100 hot sauces, 50 plus barbecue and wing sauces just out on the table, and we can pull together another 50 plus bottles or so from the fridge if one's open. Every so often we get people who come into the store and ask to try the hottest sauce. They love jalapenos in their burritos and they've eaten habanero straight, and they're ready to enter the ring and swallow some sauce and gain the admiration of a couple of friends and bystanders at the cost of a stomachache. We usually try to guide them to the 10th hottest sauce in the store, burn them with it, and move on to something mild or medium suited to their taste. Today though, while I was selling items to people who were actually paying for things, a 10 or so year old boy enters the store. I always get wary when children enter the store alone because it's full of glass bottles. They usually dart straight for the shelves and pick something up, but this child came barreling towards me like a bullet. While I make change for a couple buying some sauce, he calls out to me, "Excuse me," in a horrendous whiny pitch. I ignore the rude interruption and I continue my conversation with my customers. He parrots it again 12 times or so back to back as I thank these people and try to get them out of the store. Finally, I turn to him. "How can I help you?" "Where the f are this kid's parents?" "Hi, can I try the hottest sauce in the store?" "Not this crap again. I'm not dealing with this, not with a 10-year-old. I explain to him that the hottest sauce on the table is Hellboy, Right Hand of Doom. It's spiked with 6.66 million Scoville extract, and to be honest, if you're not experienced with this kind of stuff, more than just a tiny bit can mess up a good part of your day. And take my word for it too." I explain to him he has to be 19 years old to try it and sign a waiver, which is BS, but I'm off in 30 minutes, so screw this kid. And instead, I guide him to a tasty fermented habanero that he coughs his eyes out on, before explaining to me that he could handle the Right Hand of Doom because his dad eats spicy peppers with him all the time. "Okay," I say. He leaves, thank God. 15 minutes later, I'm interrupted by another customer. This time, a gigantic woman in a blue blouse. She's sat next to my sample table like a giant blueberry blocking up 20% of my floor space. Okay, I don't get how the size of this person is relevant to the story, but anyway. "Excuse me?" Apple doesn't fall far. The customers I'm with are polite and excuse me to speak to her. "You didn't let my son try the sauce." I explained to her that it's got extract in it, several hundred times hotter than anything he's ever eaten before, and that it can cause him severe discomfort, and that I'm not going to let him try it in my store. I explain that she can purchase the sauce and have him try it at home if she wants to. She explains to me that she married a Mexican man, and that I wouldn't believe the things we ate in New Mexico City, where he grew up. When I asked what they'd eaten there, she told me things hotter than anything we have in the store. At this point, her daughter interrupts our conversation. I kid you not. "Excuse me?" "What?" I'm getting annoyed. I was annoyed from the second I saw the kid, and now he's back 20 minutes after with 3 of them. "Why do you sell Valentina? It's not even a hot sauce." "Jesus Christ, aren't you from Mexico? It says salsa picante on the goddamn bottle." "It's $5.50 and I'm off at 6. I've had enough. How about this? You can try the sauce, and if it's as mild as you think, I'll let him try it." She agreed and grabbed her sample stick. I reached out for the Right Hand of Doom and I unscrewed the cap. Its nuclear aroma sending memories of aches to my stomach. As she goes to dip the stick into my sauce, I warn her, only take a small amount. She grins at me and then dips the stick all the way into the sauce. Trap card, bitch. She slaps it into her mouth. Immediately she looks uneasy. Before she throws herself into pure agony, she's coughing and swinging her head back and forth and trying desperately to speak, but she can't muster any words. She dropped her sample stick in all the chaos. After a solid few minutes of coughing and dry heaving, she manages a single word, "Water." I explain to her that water's not going to help her now. My relief walks in the door just in time to witness the finish. She tells me that the only reason she's coughing is because it went down the wrong pipe. She then immediately vomits into our garbage can. She apologizes for spitting it up, like she didn't just rocket launch half a liter of chum into my trash can, and then leaves without saying anything. I tossed out the trash with a smile on my face and I clocked out. The top comment says, "That's beautiful. Precisely the way to handle this kind of parent. It's unfortunate that her poor kids are probably going to acquire her destructive attitudes, but I'm so glad that you didn't make one of them suffer unnecessarily because of their poor upbringings." The comment below that one says, "I love Reaper sauce on everything, but 6.6 million sounds like something you can use to clean engine parts." Yeah, I feel like spicy and whatever that is are in completely different universes. Like, that's not spicy, that's like barely edible. Okay, moving on to post number 6. We're working too fast? Okay, we'll slow down for you. I recently found this subreddit and I think I've got a great story for it. This happened about 2 years ago. I work in construction, but more specifically, I cut concrete. A lot of people aren't familiar with my job, but all you really need to know is that I don't pour any concrete. I use big diesel and hydraulic powered saws to cut and remove it. I work at a relatively small company, 15 employees, and we're the company to use for concrete cutting and removal around here. I was the first employee hired at this company and my bosses are amazing. They've been in the industry for 25 years and 30 years respectively. We call them Brad and Cody. They know what they're doing and they'll still go out in the field and they'll still outwork any of our employees. We got awarded a no-bid contract at a very large facility to cut and remove a very large section of their outdoor slab because it had cracked. This was routine for us. We could do it in our sleep, but it was still a large project. The reason that we were given the contract but not held to a number was because they wanted it done right and fast, and they knew that we were the guys to do this, even though we aren't always the cheapest. The customer requested us to bring extra equipment and specialized saws just in case. That's important for later. The day comes that we're supposed to start, and they wanted us on the site at 6:30 a.m. for a safety meeting. Brad and Cody went out while I stayed back to get my crews ready for the day before heading out to meet them. When I arrived at 8 a.m., they were still standing by their truck talking. I asked them how the safety meeting went, and they said nobody had shown up yet. Finally, they got there at around 9 a.m. and didn't even acknowledge that they were late. We met the guy that was in charge of the project. His name was John. John said during the safety meeting that there would always be a few people around from his company to watch us while we worked. We figured that it was weird, but no big deal. We ran a routine safety meeting after, and it was time for work. We got about a third of the project completed in the first day. The entire time that we were working there were no less than 25 people standing around watching us work. We kept on joking with them to just set up bleachers. It would be easier to watch that way. They made us call it quits at 4 p.m. so they could go home. Right about this time, we started to figure that there was something up with these guys. They didn't care that we didn't get started until late, and they wanted us to end early. Yet a big part of us being there was to get it done fast. Either way, we figured that we'd still be able to get it done in about 3 days and make record time for a project of this size, all while making a fair amount of money for ourselves. The next morning, as we're getting ready to head out for the day, Brad received an email. It said, "While we can tell that so-and-so company are master operators with their machines, we feel as though they were operating in an unsafe manner by running multiple machines at once, and we request that they slow down to maintain safe working conditions. They also didn't try to make sure that our supervisors felt that they were safe." Brad was pissed. We were called in to get things done fast, and not once had we done a single thing that could be considered unsafe. When we got to the job that day for the safety meeting, Brad had changed from "screw these guys, they don't know anything about what we're doing," to "okay, we're too fast, we'll slow it right down for them." At the safety meeting, John, the same guy who sent us the email, looked at us and said, "Okay, everybody knows what we're doing, let's get it done." He tried to end the safety meeting with that, but that's when my boss spoke up. He said, "Hold on, since nobody is man enough to tell us in person and just wants to hide behind their emails, let's get this straight. We're too fast and too unsafe for you?" John became visibly uncomfortable and stammered out, "Well, there was a lot of people standing around and watching you yesterday, and I felt that somebody would get hurt if they decided to get closer to watch. I had set up safety cones with red danger tape strung between them and told nobody to cross. We had taken proper safety precautions. If they didn't feel comfortable to have that many people watch, then don't have that many people standing watching and doing nothing." All Brad said was, "Okay, we'll be real slow, and if anybody crosses our line, we'll shut the site down for an hour for another safety meeting. Okay, time for the malicious compliance." We started up for the day. Something to note about our saws and tractors and other heavy equipment is that we do have the ability to turn up the idle, or in other words, we can turn up or down the speed of the motors. So instead of everything moving normally and how it should, which is fast, everything's now moving at turtle speed. Brad told us that if we ever sped up our machines, that he'd kick us off the job. Even Cody, his business partner. I was cutting with our saw while Cody was in the excavator to remove the pieces that I cut. Brad was in the skid steer to haul the pieces to the dump truck. I'd cut the concrete into 6x6 foot pieces, which would normally take me about 20 to 30 minutes. It was taking upwards of 3 hours for one piece. After I would cut, Cody in the excavator would turn his machine on, slowly turn and stop, extend his bucket, stop, lower the bucket, stop, tilt the bucket, stop, pick up the piece, stop, turn, stop, drop the piece, stop, shut off his machine, all without idling up. And then Brad would start his machine and repeat the same process to load into the dump truck. You get the point, it was painfully slow. After the first piece was ready to be pulled out and Cody started the process, John, who was just sitting on the sideline pale-faced, crossed my line to ask if we were serious. At that point, Brad screamed, "Shut down!" and we all stepped away for an hour for a safety meeting. John crossed the line 3 times in the first day and 8 times total during the project. His employees never once crossed the danger line. Effectively, John was the only one that he should have been worried about in his email, about getting too close and being in danger. John kept on saying, "No way, you guys are being serious. What happened to what you were doing yesterday? You were so much more efficient." Brad just said, "I have in writing that you felt unsafe. So for the remainder of this project, we're going to be operating at a safe pace." It ended up taking us 3 weeks to finish that horribly slow pace instead of 3 to 4 days at a full speed. And the best part? The head of the facility came out to see what was taking us so long. We showed him the email and he agreed with what we were doing. He told us that he hates John and that he's insufferable to work around. He said the success of this bonus is directly tied to John's annual bonus. He asked how much we were charging them, and we told him that per piece of equipment and truck and saw that is on the site is all being billed to them by the hour, and that John has requested that we had nearly double the amount of equipment than we actually needed or used. The facility head just laughed and said, "Fantastic. I'll make sure that you're paid in full. Don't go easy on us with the bill." That's how we maliciously complied our way into charging about 200 grand for a job that should have realistically only been worth about 45. I even got a solid 20 grand bonus because Brad and Cody are fantastic bosses, and they knew that we made a killing on that job. Update, I felt like I did want to clarify a couple of things after reading the comments. First of all, yeah, John did try to get us to go back to our previous working rate, but he would only ever verbally ask. My boss kept on telling him, "I need that in writing and you've got a deal. Hell, might even save yourself some money while you're at it." But John either never understood what he was implying or really didn't want to send an email recanting his statement, believing that he'd look dumb for making a mistake. And second, this was a big project, bigger than what my part in it was. That being said though, with how John was with us, I'd seriously seriously doubt every other aspect of the job went smooth for him. I bet they ended up with some profit, but not nearly as much as they would have without John, meaning that he still probably got a bonus, just a very small one. And third, how did they have so many people able to stand around and watch for 3 weeks and not work? Well, by the end of the 3rd week, there was probably only 10 people watching us, but this facility had hundreds of people working there, so for 25 people at a time to sneak out for most of the day to watch us wasn't too big of a deal for them. They did usually rotate, and if we saw somebody one day, then we didn't usually see them again for about a week. Also, just another little satisfying part of the story that I should have included was that Cody has had a saying from the very first time that I worked with him. He says, "We aren't trying to retire off this one single job, we're treating the customer fair, but fair isn't always cheap." After the facility head gave us the go-ahead to charge what was needed and not take it easy, Cody looked at us and said, "Yep, we're retiring off this one." Obviously it was more of a joke, but the satisfaction I got from hearing him say that after knowing him for 10 years to be the guy who's extra fair will never be rivaled. Yeah, the top comment. I love that the facility head was willing to waste money to throw John under the bus. That was so fun to read. And moving on to post number 7. No calls and I can't leave the floor. Okay, this story harkens back to ye olden days when Blockbuster and Hollywood Video were the things to do on a family-friendly Friday, and cell phones were still something most people didn't really consider necessary, aka the 90s. I took a job at a video store near my house. It was a small family-owned store with 3 different branches in town. The job was wonderful. I loved movies and games. It was close to my residence and my school. I even got free video rentals and a discount from the sub shop next door. The video store was located in a beautiful old building from the 1920s. It had marble stairs and a really amazing cage elevator that led up to the storage and employee lounge. The job was perfect for me. The hours were flexible, the pay was decent, but the one drawback was my supervisor. Let's call her Amanda, because that was her name. Screw Amanda. Amanda was on the older side and seemed to not be content with how her life had turned out. As a result, she took all of her frustrations out on anybody she could, especially those people that she worked with who happened to be younger. If you were a college student like myself, you earned a special extra helping of disdain from her. I mean, really, how dare you decide to actually have aspirations of making more than $7.50 an hour? While I am generally fairly tolerant of people like Amanda, she really went the extra mile to annoy me as much as humanly possible. She was bitter and mean and petty, and did anything and everything she could to be unpleasant. She wasn't even nice to customers. The only upside to this attitude was that she didn't let Karen customers get away with their Karen-ness. I might have been able to take more if she happened to be particularly knowledgeable or good at her job, but she was neither, and only appeared to have the job because of good old nepotism. She was the daughter-in-law of the owner. She knew nothing about movies or games or gaming systems or anything that we rented or sold. When a customer had a question, she'd pawn them off onto another employee. When she had a problem with the computers, who did she call to fix it? Me. When there was a delivery that needed to be checked into the system, who did she call? Me. When stock needed to be dragged up from the stock room, that'd be me again. Any unpleasant task that came up, she would always try to give it to me. Generally, she hid in the back watching TV or talking on the phone, which did tie up the store's landline for hours, or doing anything and everything she could to avoid doing her actual job. When I brought up Amanda to Ken, the owner, he simply sighed and gave a pained look and asked me to try to bear it and stay out of her way if I could. I got the distinct impression that Ken didn't much care for her either, but she was his daughter-in-law. He did his best to try to make sure that I wasn't scheduled to work with her, but at least once a week I had to work with this paragon of kindness and light. One day I was on the phone with a customer discussing the late fees on their account when Amanda wanted to make a call. This resulted in Amanda ripping me a new one in front of an entire store of people. It was a Saturday and we were packed to the rafters. She yelled so loud that the woman on the phone asked me if we were being robbed and whether she should call the police. Before I can even answer, Amanda yanked the phone out of my hand and slammed it into the cradle. "You are never ever to be on that phone, you understand me?" While I was desperately aching to headbutt her, I bit my tongue and I took a deep breath and I counted to 10. When that didn't work, I counted to 20, then 50. Instead of telling her that I hoped that she'd be ravaged by rabid wolverines, I simply smiled and said, "All right," and that seemed to annoy her even more than if I had gotten angry. She stormed back to the office and I took a stream of customers, all of whom asked me if I was okay, and one of them offered ideas on how to dispose of a body. I appreciated the suggestion, but I had plenty of my own ideas, and while evisceration with a pair of rusty safety scissors might be a fulfilling immediate solution, it probably wasn't good for my lifetime goals, unless those goals involved a jail cell and becoming overly acquainted by a thick woman with one eyebrow named Big Betty. Instead, I checked it off in my big book of voodoo curses, and I hoped I'd have a chance to pay Amanda back for her thoughtful gesture of embarrassing me in front of everybody. Still, there were a few more pieces to be laid out for my malicious compliance, and Amanda would not disappoint me. The next piece came perhaps a month after. I'd been at work for about 7 hours of my 9-hour shift, and I'd only seen Amanda once, and that had been when she left the store. Considering that I only had 2 hours left of my shift, and I hadn't yet taken a break, I really needed to go to the bathroom. I told my coworker that I was heading to the restroom. This was, however, apparently not in keeping with Amanda's view for the universe. She actually began to bang and kick the bathroom door, demanding I come out. I took my time, I washed my hands, I adjusted my hair, and I calmly walked out of the bathroom. While she began to scream, I ignored her and I walked up to the front of the store and I took the cart of movies to be reshelved. She grabbed the front of the cart and she swiped the movies off the top. She then informed me of my questionable parentage, told me that I like to passionately hug mothers, and that I was a female dog. Really, I had no idea about any of these things about myself. I thought all that time that I was your regular everyday college student. I could have probably gotten on television if I had known how unique I was sooner. Amanda told me that under no uncertain terms was I to ever leave the floor while I was on the clock. Again, I summoned an inner calm that would have made Gandhi proud. I forced a smile and nodded, all right. While I seemed calm on the outside, I had made up my mind that I'd have my chance. No matter how small, I would have my moment. That shining moment came on a lazy and blissfully quiet morning. As it was a morning, it was only me and Amanda. Hopefully she'd stay in the office and I wouldn't have to deal with her at all. When I came in, there were workmen in the back working on the elevator. One of the guys came up to me and told me that he needed a part and he'd be back tomorrow to finish up the work. Annoying as I'd now have to schlep armfuls of heavy tapes up the stairs, but it wasn't the end of the world. The light of my life arrived a few hours later without a word to anybody. I stood at the front putting Be Kind rewind stickers on a batch of newer rifles when I noticed Amanda through the back door getting into the elevator. After the man told me that he needed a part, it didn't even occur to me that the elevator had the power on, and I had a moment of amusement at thinking that Amanda was going to have to take the hated stairs. She was, above all, lazy. However, it seemed the elevator did indeed have power, and it worked. At least it worked just enough to go half a floor and then stop. It was close enough to the upper floor that climbing out onto the floor was impossible, and just far enough from the lower floor that climbing out was impossible. I could not believe my eyes. Malicious compliance activated. I couldn't entirely see Amanda as she tried to open the door and get out, but I could hear her. The sounds of frustration increased until I heard the most beautiful sound I ever heard. OP! A slow smile reminiscent of the Grinch curved my lips. I walked to the very edge of the sales floor and I called out, yes, Amanda, the elevator's stuck. Can you open the door from your side? Me, I don't know, I can't see it from here. Amanda huffed in annoyance. Well, get over here and try to open it. Me, I can't do that, Amanda. Amanda, why the enter colorful verbiage here? Not me. I'm not allowed to leave the floor while I'm on the clock under any circumstances. Amanda, are you kidding me? Me, you said it yourself. Since I value my job, I can't possibly go against orders. A stream of curses came from the locked and stuck elevator. I'm pretty sure that I'm still not old enough for the things I heard that day. Amanda, call maintenance. The number should be in the office. Trying to sound as innocent and sympathetic as I could, while also trying not to burst out laughing. I can't do that either. I'd have to leave the floor to go to the office. Amanda, you think you're real? So many naughty words funny, don't you? Me, I don't know what you mean. Amanda, call Ken then. I know you know his number. Me, well I would, but I'm not allowed to use the phone, remember? Amazingly, there were no curses. There were no screams. There was not even one word telling me that my parents were never married. It was silent. I think for the first time she realized that she might actually be in a little trouble. She was stuck in a position entirely of her own making, without any way out of it for the foreseeable future. Amanda, OP, please just get me out of here. Me, I'm sorry, Amanda. I'm following orders. All pretense of niceness was dropped as she proceeded to inform me of all of my imagined faults and those of my parents, friends, and any other relations I might have or think to have in the future. And then she sealed her fate. She yelled at me that I was fired. In truth, I really only planned on letting her stew for a few minutes, but after that, nah. Me, I'm fired. Okay, then I guess I'll head home. Oh, I should also let you know that Bill called and said that he'd be in at 7 instead of 5. He has to pick up his brother from the airport, so yeah, I guess you'll be in there for a while. I hope you've got a book or something. Amanda, what? You bleep, 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 bleep. You think you can do this to me? When I get out of here, I'm gonna bleep you and you're bleeping bleep. Me, wow, okay, yeah, have fun with that. Have a good one. I'll leave my name tag and my shirt on the front desk. Amanda, wait. Me, bye. Amanda, wait. Me, don't worry, I'll lock up on the way out and I'll put up a sign so people know that we're shut. Amanda, OP, wait, I didn't mean it, come back. I walked up front, I wrote up a sign that said we were shut until 7 p.m. due to unforeseen circumstances. The very last thing that I heard from Amanda before I opened the door was, but I have to pee. Still laughing to myself, I locked the door and I drove the 45 minutes out to Ken's house to let him know that the shop was shut. Could I have gone the 5 minutes to my house and called? Sure, I could have. Did I? No. Ken seemed a bit surprised to see me there. Ken, I thought you were working today. Me, I was, but Amanda fired me. Ken, she's not allowed to do that. All hiring and firing goes through me, and she knows it. Don't worry, I'll call her. I think maybe it's time to talk to my son about her. I can't keep her on with her acting like this. Me, I don't think she'll be able to answer the phone. Ken gave me a long, sharp look as I tried very hard not to smile, and then I gave up entirely and I just smiled broadly back at him. Ken, OP, me, yeah. Yeah? Ken, what did you do? Me? I didn't do a thing. I only followed her orders. Ken leaned down to meet me eye to eye. What happened? I gave him the full tale, from her telling me that I couldn't use the phone under any circumstances, to her telling me that I wasn't allowed to leave the sales floor when I was on the clock. Then I told him about her being stuck in the elevator. Ken, you didn't tell her the elevator was broken. Me, I didn't even realize it had power. Ken just stood there looking at me gobsmacked and then started laughing. I should really go let her out. He paused for a second and looked down at his dirty hands and clothes and then up at me. But I really shouldn't leave those flowers half planted, and then I should probably take a shower. I don't want to make that drive covered in dirt. Me, oh, of course not. You've got a really nice car and it would be a lot of work to get that much dirt out of your seats and carpet. Do you need some help with the planting? Ken nodded solemnly back at me and gave another chuckle. It took probably another hour to finish planting the flowers. Ken told me that I would be paid for the day and sent me home with assurances that I did indeed still have a job and that he would deal with Amanda. I fully enjoyed the rest of my half day off. I did hear from Bill when he got there. The elevator repair guy had just arrived, and Amanda ended up spending about 5 hours stuck in the elevator. After that, I only ever saw her one more time. She glared daggers at me as I waved happily to her as she carried a bag of her things out to her car. When I think about it, I still get a smile on my face. Besides, I only did what she told me to do. That was so amazing. OP, that was so good to read. The top comment says, this really puts the malicious into malicious compliance. Excellent. Yeah, good job, OP. That was so awesome. Yeah, it's been such a fun episode today. That was such a good story. And moving on to story number 8. You're salaried, right? Just stay up for this meeting. Before we begin, dear readers, a brief bit of backstory. I found that every company has a Todd. You'll know who your Todd is because he'll call you when you don't know who to call. When the unthinkable happens and everything's on fire and there's no hope for salvation, Todd steps in to fix it. Todd spends his entire time just fixing the unfixable. He's been with the company since the dawn of time, knows the true names of several demons, and was in the room when the old magic was written. Our Todd has an elite team to be on call when stuff breaks. Each team member is the highest authority in the company for one specific thing or another. They are the elite. Their word is law, and to question them is to question Todd. Our story begins shortly after I'd accomplished our greatest goal and became the newest member of Todd's team. Now, my company works with point of sale. We sell computers, software, printers, card readers, pretty much anything you need to take money from someone else. After years working in the call center, I proved myself worthy of Todd's attention. I interviewed, tested, and became the specialist of third-party integration. My focus is the connection between our product and whatever weird stuff your company wants to use. Examples of this include getting smart lights to change on command from an ordering kiosk, letting the staff control the new jukebox you bought with their employee ID cards, or getting the sales data for the day to report to your Canadian counterparts in both French and English, but only if somebody buys the poutine surprise that day, and other fun conundrums that only the client can fathom. It's important to note that during my time in the call center, I was paid hourly. As a specialist, I would be made a salaried employee and would be on call. After accepting the position, I was told that I'd have a trial period of a month to prove myself. I would remain hourly, but I'd have a pay increase to more closely match my expected rate as a salaried employee. I would have the title change and the new responsibilities of my job, but I had this month to prove that I was worth the extra money. The first day of my new job, we get a call from one of our more needy clients. They lay out a series of demands. Number 1, all of their stores must be upgraded to Windows 10. Number 2, as each store makes about 10k a day, taking them down for a remodel is not acceptable. Number 3, all of these upgrades must be done overnight while the store's shut. Number 4, if the upgrade fails, the store must be rolled back that night so that they can open hourly. Number 5, the window of time to do one of these upgrades is 8 hours. And number 6, the fastest they've been able to do one is 10. All of this means one thing. They need a specialist to do the upgrades. One that knows their integration. I give Todd the put me in coach nod and a deal is struck. Todd's about to leave on vacation, which leaves me under control of Steve, the director of the support center, who used to be my boss before I worked for Todd. I'm now on overnights. 4 nights a week I upgrade these stores. I supervise 2 to 3 technicians who are on the site in separate stores. I do all the software, they do the hardware. This process is staggeringly based on time zones, so I generally am pulling 12-hour shifts. The overtime is amazing, especially paired with the raise that I got. Fast forward a week or two, the initial batch does not go the best. I've got a 40% failure rate. That's due to scripts provided to both the client and me by the various third-party companies used by the stores, including their music, food delivery, and credit card processors. Everybody on their side knows who's the bad guy here. Talks are in place and we're moving forward. A meeting between the client and us is scheduled near the end of the week, right in the middle of my off time. As I said, I'm working 12 hours a day. I live a full hour away from work, and for security reasons, I can't do these upgrades outside of the office. I've got 10 hours to eat, sleep, get up, and eat again before work. Once I get to work, there are no breaks on the upgrade train, no lunch, no stopping, so I get home around 11 a.m. each day. The meeting's set for 4 p.m. I can't get any reasonable sleep before the meeting or after. Steve demands that I be there to account for my failures. I already have another specialist to resigned as my proxy for these sort of meetings because sleep is a thing. I also explained that I'm still hourly, but he won't hear it. He insists that I need to be there to explain why the project is going so poorly and that my explanation better not be just throwing other people under the bus. He tries to explain that I'm salaried and therefore need to be there when the company needs me, especially when I'm the one who's screwing up. Again, I try to remind him about my probationary period, but he won't listen. And there, my friends, begins the malicious compliance. I clock in at 10 p.m. the day before the meeting. I do my upgrades, all 3 of which are a success, due to what I assume is a change in the third-party backend. The scripts I'm provided with work perfect this time, and all goes well. The corporate contact I report to in the morning tells me that the meeting is just to go over the new changes, and I'll get the cliff notes in my email. No need to attend the meeting. I thank them and I sign out. Then I sit. For 6 hours I twiddle my thumbs, taking a lunch break and a car nap, and waiting for the meeting. When it's time, I'll walk upstairs to the top floor and conference room, where everybody but Steve is shocked to see me. I calmly take my place and I wait for the meeting to start, stating that I was asked to be here. The meeting lasts 30 minutes and consists of the new procedure, praise for my diligence, and a quick overview of how the timetable's going to change because of the past failures. It is noted that my performance has prevented a lot of sites from failing when they would have otherwise, and the client is happy with my work. Steve, who had previously blamed me for the failures, sheepishly agrees that I was a good fit for the project. And then the meeting ends with the best part. The person giving the talk states that she knows that I'm asleep right now, so she'll go over the changes with me personally when I get in tonight. Meanwhile, the guy that I asked to sit in on the meeting for me will work with them to set up the changes to be deployed. About 3 hours of work so that it's all ready when I get in at 10. The meeting ends. Steve makes a comment about the changes being done by somebody with more experience and hints that it should be my responsibility. I cheerfully say that rather than waste my co-workers' time, I'll just do the changes myself. I've got a 3rd or a 4th win by now and I'm ready to go. At the end of day 2, I've spent 36 hours at work. Caffeine is my only salvation and we're nearly done. Near the end, I'm basically waiting for a technician at my last door to finish testing, so I tell him to call me and I shut my eyes for about half an hour just to rest a bit. All is well. I get cold, everything's green, the vigil is over. 2 of my friends insist on driving me home, where I promptly pass out into the most heavenly sleep I've had in ages. I wake up to an email asking me to head into work for a meeting with HR. It's my day off, so I'm kind of perplexed. I head on in and I apologize for being fashionably late. The meeting's with the head of HR, who has a report that I was sleeping on the job. There's camera footage of my 30-minute power nap. I calmly explain that Steve had asked me to show up to the meeting and then asked me to stay later to set up the changes, and by the time I took my nap, during what I called my paid 30-minute break, I'd been in the building for 35 hours. I politely remind the HR head that I'm on my trial period and I'll be expecting overtime pay for that time. It came out to about 33 hours and change due to my extended lunch break. Todd returned from his vacation and taught Steve a new definition of duties. From then on, he would not be given control over Todd's team when he was away, and he would report directly to the CEO. The project completed without much incident, and I passed my probation with flying colors. Edit a bit more information since people are asking. Steve would later be fired several months after due to a similar situation where he threw somebody so much harder under the bus that everybody stopped and saw how uncool that was. He got replaced with new Steve, who's a superior Steve in every way. Wow, that was a good story too. All of the stories today have been so good. And yeah, that's enough for today. That's a good place to end it, I feel like. Even though we don't really need a wholesome meme, I do have a wholesome meme. This one is so funny. I took my company's stapler on vacation and I took photos of it in front of cool places, and the stapler says floor 4, do not remove. How cute is that? And I've definitely read this one before, but it's okay. I feel like this one sort of fits with this episode. The stapler is so happy. Oh my god, I get to see all of these awesome places. So cute. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you had a great time today. That was such an adventure and such a fun episode, and let me know down below if you enjoyed it. And the comment of the day today goes to Errant Wins. Things that we don't like to hear. Number 1, keep the peace. Number 2, that's just how they are. Number 3, you have to do it because we're family. Yeah, oh my god, how annoying are all of those? That's a really good list. I feel like we could definitely add to this list, but yeah, that's definitely a good start. We read so much aggravating stuff, and it felt really good to not really read anything too bad today. I feel like today's episode was a nice break from all the am I the a-hole, and yeah, I hope you had a great time today, guys, and I'm out of here. Make sure you look after yourself and make sure you have a beautiful, amazing rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!